to affect the Russian economy. So this adds to the real pressure that there is on Vladimir Putin. And I think to a degree he can see that, but he still is of a mind where he believes he can win militarily. And therefore, it's not a factor that is occupying his mind hugely at the moment. It's only when he gets that realization that he can't win, and I don't know what's going to trigger that, but it's not far off. I think that realization will start to come in, I would hope, later this year, but certainly by mid to end of 2026.
Let's cover also situation on the ground and the battlefield situation right now. According to CNN, Russia is still trying to generate a big force to conduct another full-scale offensive on the east of Ukraine or on other areas on the front lines. And also, according to the CNN, this offensive could begin as early as this summer. What is your reaction to this?
I haven't seen the detail behind it, and I've been trying to read into it and find the detail. I don't think the Russians have got the ability to generate a large force. If they had, they'd have done it already. They may bring in a formed North Korean force or capability like that. That would be an interesting move to bring it in. But the Russians so far have not shown the tactical ability to bring a large force together to have a military effect on the front line. And because of their losses, they will be losing and have lost most of their people with the sort of military experience to do that and to be able to operate it. And the other thing that is coming in is the nature of the front line has changed. The drone technology that is operating over the front line, and especially the developments in drone technology, where we've now gone from radio-controlled drones to fiber optic controlled drones that are very difficult to jam, and the advances that Ukrainians have done in particular with their technology has changed that front line, where you'd ordinarily get contact between troops that would be measured over a few hundred meters in depth. That is now measured in depths of kilometers, 5, 7, 10 kilometers. You can have tactical battles. So even if there's a large formation, the threat that there is to that formation as it moves up to Ukrainian defensive positions can start from a very close tactical perspective up to 10 kilometers or more away. And that's without using sophisticated long-range Western and other missiles and weapons to interdict it. So I'm trying to find the detail that CNN has used to get that, apart from the fact that every year there's the summer offensive when the ground is right for an armored formation to come in. So from a theoretical perspective, it could happen. From a practical perspective, I don't think it's going to happen in the way that their headlines are suggesting.
And don't you think that the Ukrainian armed forces have already stabilized the front lines and its defense against the Russian forces?
Yeah, I think the Ukrainian forces have done a fantastic job in stabilizing the front lines. Even if they're losing, a few hundred meters here or a kilometer there, given what they've managed to achieve over the last 3 years, in holding back what was on paper the second largest military capability in the world by making sure that the Russians can't create local air superiority over the battlefield, by developing new technologies that has turned that the contact line at the edge of the front line from being the range of direct fire weapons, whether those be tank guns or armored personnel guns or machine guns or personal weapons of the soldiers. They've extended that out to 5, 7, 10 or more kilometers through the use of FPV drones in particular. So I think Ukraine has rewritten the tactics manual as to how you stabilize and sustain a defensive position. And the next step is to turn that into something that you can then exploit from an offensive capability to push the enemy back.
Do you still believe that Ukraine has enough capabilities and human power to conduct a counteroffensive on the battlefield?
I think Ukraine has, not across the whole of the front line, but in specific areas that can dislocate the Russians. We saw that with the Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region. There's nothing to stop a similar incursion somewhere else, causing the Russians to be dislocated again and giving an opportunity to break through. I don't think that the Ukrainians are going to be able to generate, without a huge amount more support from the West, enough of a tactical capability to break through the Russians and to physically push them back across the whole of the front line, including from Ukraine. But I think a number of smaller operations in different areas could dislocate the Russians to a point where potentially their defenses could collapse and they would feel as if they have to move back in the same way that we saw down in Kherson whenever Ukraine managed to back the Russians up against the Dnipro. And the Russians had to make the decision to withdraw across to the other side of the river rather than get lost. So that is a possibility at some stage in the future. But the war is going to be won at the operational level. The war is going to be won with the activities that Ukraine is carrying out to stop the Russians being able to continue to prosecute their tactical battles. So this is, as we talked about before we came on air, this is the operations that are being controlled by General Budanov and his wider team that are helping him in attacking Russia's oil infrastructure, its ability to continue to fund its war, attacking its military factories, its ability to continue to manufacture capability, attacking Russian generals inside Moscow, creating panic amongst the higher level command and control and nervousness about Ukraine's freedom of maneuver, attacking military airfields deep inside Russia, making those very vulnerable, and reducing Russia's strategic air capability, attacking the Black Sea fleet to a point where it has become virtually inoperable in the Black Sea. All of these tactics are the tactics that will force Putin to the negotiating table and will create the conditions, I think, for Ukraine to win.
Thank you, Colonel Ingram, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much, and indeed, Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does it mean that Putin is afraid of the possibility of losing his grip on power in case of ceasefire with Ukraine on appropriate for Ukraine terms, on normal terms?
Yeah, I think there is the chance of that, not for a ceasefire on 30 days, but for what would come after that. Now, I think it's clear from all the things that President Trump has said that his intent is absolutely to end the war, and the main effort in President Trump's eyes is a ceasefire and then negotiations. And I don't think that Trump sees it through a prism of winning and losing. He does think of it in terms of stopping the killing. Now, in many ways, you could say that would be looking at war as or peace through a humanitarian prism. The problem with that, of course, is it rewards the aggressor. What the West would say, and Ukraine, and of course, which I would support, is that there should be a just peace, as Guterres has said, of the UN, in accordance with international law, the UN Charter, and with UN General Assembly instructions. But there's a big delta between those two and what Russia still wants, which is really the equivalent of what happened in the negotiations in Istanbul in 2022, which is that Russia really wants a surrender peace of Ukraine. That is not going to happen. And it's that, not gap analysis, but chasm analysis between the two sides is still so huge that leads you to think that there's very little likelihood in the next few weeks of certainly having a enduring peace settlement, a ceasefire leading to something which would endure. And the reason I say that is also partly from the historical record. So, for example, it took 2 years and 500 negotiations for the Korean War to come to an armistice. It took 5 years of negotiations for the Treaty of Paris to end the Vietnam War. And, negotiations can't be necessarily ticked in a box in a number of weeks, which is obviously President Trump is always in a hurry, but that's